This is Robert Capuccio. Welcome to the Self-Help Antidote, a weekly dose of reason, perspective, and insight, where we challenge conventional thinking and explore authentic strategies and insights around personal transformation. Our commitment to you is to bring you some of the world's leading experts in the domains of fitness, wellness, coaching, and behavior change, separating fact from fallacy. Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Self-Help Antidote. Today we're going to talk about something that I know you've been experiencing to some degree or another. How do I know this? Because it seems like everybody is experiencing this to one degree to another, and that is emotional fatigue. I mean, we talk about the hustle, we talk about the grind, we talk about getting more things done, and sometimes that is quintessentially the name of the game, but what gets in the way? What happens when we're pouring from an empty cup? So I had moved internationally and back, which is a long story that I'm not going to get into. Upon returning back to the United States, I picked up with my wife and moved cities again over the holidays. So Christmas was, Boxing Day was filled with literally unpacking tons of boxes. I think this holiday season was the most things I've unwrapped and boxes I've unpacked in my entire life, but it was not very festive at all. Mostly because we already owned the things we were unpacking. And yeah, we're really exhausted, but it's not just that. It's not just what's happening in our lives. It's the things that's happening all around us because, as you know, when you're moving faster and you're exhausted, the demands don't decrease. The world keeps going and the world and people need things from you. And sometimes, whether that's the reality or seemingly the reality, because you yourself are suffering from fatigue, it seems like when you're at your most exhausted, the world is at its absolutely most demanding. And I don't know if that's perceptual or reality, but what do you do in those circumstances? I just put out a post on social media about the default mode network, which is an integrated network of brain centers that become more active when you're engaged in activities like daydreaming or your mind's just wandering versus focused attention, which is the opposite of focused discipline, like willpower type of activities. And being in that default mode network is what gives us our creativity, our innovation. It's kind of like Stephen Covey's analogy of stopping to sharpen the saw, taking the time to do that. So you're not only more effective, but you're more efficient. What do you do in those moments when you're really exhausted? Write us because we'd like to know. So I'm here with my lovely wife and, we're just going to talk a little bit about emotional fatigue and emotional contagion and what do you do about it? Hey, Amy.
Hey, Bobby. Thanks again for having me on your platform. And yes, I am definitely emotionally fatigued and I know you are too. And yeah, I believe just chatting with you folks to hear your thoughts on this would be very, very exciting for me because I want to hear what other people are doing to alleviate either the fatigue itself or finding ways to live with it or deal with it. Because I think as a collective, we were talking about this the other day, collective consciousness, right? We all have things that we just kind of know to do and it just seems like everybody else is doing it. Or we just all start to feel a certain way and it feels like everybody else is feeling the same way at the same time. And it's this, I don't know what you want to call it, almost like a hive mind thing going on. So I'm sure there are tons of people who are feeling the same way, feeling emotionally fatigued and drained. And I'm also sure that there's some people who have techniques that they can share, to combat this or to alleviate this or to live with it. Okay. So if you hear me sound funny, it's because my husband is conducting my pattern of speech. Like, speak up, speak faster.
You have to understand, she's probably the most soft-spoken person in the world. If she's literally a meter from me, I can't hear a word she's saying, and I'm just staring right now. It's almost like a flat line. Like, it's almost like we've lost the patient in terms of audio output.
Yeah, whatever.
I'm the opposite end of that spectrum.
Yeah, you whisper and like butterflies hear you. That's how loud you are. Okay.
weirdo.
I know, it's a weird analogy. I think it's something about the moon or whatever happens and a butterfly flaps its wings or something. Anyway, okay, I'm just going crazy here. Anyway, emotional fatigue, right? So as Bobby said, he moved halfway across the world, I would say, and back, and literally had to join me in like packing up a house and moving. Well, first of all, finding the new place that we moved to, and then packing up a house and moving here, and then unboxing here and getting settled. And everyone knows like moving is literally one of the hardest things, right? That you do as a grown up. I mean, I'm sure as kids it affects them too when their parents are moving with them. But as a grown up, it's a big thing to do. And add that to just like life not stopping for you to catch your breath. You find yourself like being agitated easily, right? Do you get that, babe? Like feeling agitated and just wanting to go to sleep in the middle of the day.
You live with me. I'm in a constant state lately of agitation. And I feel that because I notice not only my aggravation threshold is a lot lower, but normally what triggers aggravation is it's just things that I wouldn't even notice before. And now everything is irritable. One of the things that I noticed that you have to be really careful of is when you go from empathy into sympathy. I notice myself, well, if you take a look at empathy, and we've talked about it on this show, what is when you can imaginatively project yourself into the thoughts and emotions and perceptual reality of another person, and you're feeling with them. Sympathy is very different, and sympathy is not very constructive at all. It's when you're feeling for someone. It's almost like in its worst, it's like pity. But when you're sympathizing with someone, you're more focused on yourself. Like they'll bring up something and it's like, oh yeah, in your mind, you're like, I'm feeling that too. Oh man, I know what it's like to be like, and it's like, you're not with them. You're intrinsically more with yourself. And it becomes about you because your focal point is not in the space between you and another person. It's not on another person. It's on yourself. And to be honest, I'm finding that happening and me catching myself and going, okay, where are you right now? Like you have left the building in this conversation. And normally conversations that are engaging are exhausting because I'm feeling a little bit of emotional contagion to where if I'm around someone who's struggling emotionally, I find out that like all of a sudden I'm struggling emotionally. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. I know what you mean. It makes total sense. You know, we all feed off of one another's energies, you know, whether or not you're aware of it. When someone's feeling, you know, what do you call you, like a Debbie Downer, or someone's like a party pooper or whatever, you come into a room and it just feels like you've sucked all the energy out of the room because everyone was all happy. You came here really sad and you brought everyone down. Yeah.
You're affected by whatever that person's name happens to rhyme with. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's not what I meant, but yeah, something like that. But yeah, no, I feel like with it is a real thing, and yes, for the most part, a lot of people don't talk about it. Right? That's. I think that's also a problem. Most people don't. It's like, okay, I have my own problems to deal with. I don't want to hear about anybody else's problems. Or people feel like, well, I don't want to be a burden on other people. Let me just, mind my own business, stay in my own house, so don't talk about stuff. And so everyone walks around feeling like they're the only ones feeling the way they're feeling, or dealing with things they're dealing with, not realizing that more people are feeling that way. And sometimes talking does help. Because talking in a constructive way, talking, saying, I'm feeling this way, and the other person actually listening, not necessarily thinking about themselves in that moment. And of course, you also sharing how you feel so the person that's talking to you understands that they're not alone and that they're not weird for feeling that way.
You know what I'm wondering listening to this? Because a lot of times people say, well, you don't want to ruminate and complain about things that are constantly bothering you. And I wonder how many times, complaining like anything is a conditioned response So if you're conditioned to complain about things continually, there's a benefit within that complaint.
For you.
For you, yeah. But I don't mean in a tangible world, but in your outside world, but there's a benefit for you. But I also wonder if complaining is because of a lack of being heard. So I can't get into the details of this, and I won't, but one of the school districts that we work with had an absolute tragedy. And I remember I was sitting there with a mental health counselor that works with us, and we were talking about a few things that within that area have happened. I was saying, well, what is it that brings people to a certain point? Because people say, well, that person just snapped. And it's like, no, they didn't just snap. Or sometimes maybe they do, but more likely than not, there was a series of things going on for months or maybe years that brought them to a point where their actions were tragic. And I was just talking to her. I said, well, what causes it? She says, I think it's people feel unseen and they feel invisible and like they're not worth anything to anyone. And we got into this whole conversation about Fight Club, as I do. I bring everything back to Fight Club. I'm obsessed with the layers of that story, the book, more so than the film. And I was like, wow, okay. So I wonder how much complaining is because you get together with people who usually complain a lot. And you're just complaining at one another. And that's very different than truly talking about your situation and affective labeling and identifying, like what someone truly feels. And having someone hold the space for you where you can go deep. And I think sometimes that complaining is trying to rehash the situations in which you feel powerless, in which you feel unseen. And sometimes even talking amongst people, you feel invisible.
Of course. Oh my goodness, there's so much that you're talking about right now that I actually want to dive into. But wow, okay, you're absolutely right. First of all, when you're okay, I'll use myself as an example. Growing up back in Nigeria, I remember this. I have this very vivid memory of being in our backyard, and my stepmom was sitting by the tap outside a few meters away from me. And I don't know what I was saying, but whatever it was I was saying, I was repeating myself. Like, as you notice, I had this pattern of repeating myself, right? Remember, that's a thing that I struggle with. I have to constantly.
Really?
Yes.
No, I've never noticed, actually.
Oh, that's so sweet. Don't worry. You don't have to sleep on the couch tonight. Okay, so I have a pattern of repeating myself, and it's a thing I have to work on. And she literally looked at me and was like, you repeat yourself a lot. I don't know why. All these years later, I have that vivid memory in my brain. I can't forget it because a lot of people have said that to me. You know, whenever someone says, oh my God, you're repeating yourself, or people roll their eyes, or they're like, oh my goodness, enough. You're nagging me too much. You're beating me over the head with this thing. I'm going to die. I remember that, you know, and I'm doing that thing again. And I found myself wondering, okay, why do I do this? And I can honestly tell you it's because I feel like no one's listening to me.
I'm sorry, what?
Look, I love you. Like, no one's listening to me. And so I repeat myself. And I don't just repeat myself one way. I repeat myself multiple different ways. And then at some point I'm going, okay, who am I trying to get to hear me? Am I trying to make myself hear myself? Or am I really, really wanting these people to give me some kind of response that lets me know that they've heard me? But then what is that response? You know, it's like I'm looking for something from them that will make me feel like they heard what I said, and then I stop repeating myself. Otherwise, I just keep repeating myself. It's terrible. So I'm fully aware of this, and I think complaining is something like that too, because I'm very visual, and so a lot of things just stay in my mind as like images. There's another moment I remember I did something that I thought was a mistake, and this was back in the day in New York, and I was at this play that I was a part of, and I was supposed to be meeting with this agent, and I think I said something like, "Oh yeah, we should get together for drinks sometime," and then I wasn't sure if that was a proper thing to say or not to say, and I was talking to my fellow artists that were working together at that point about it. And she was like, listen, we all have our own problems. We don't want to keep hearing about yours. I'm sorry. And I shut up. And she's not the only person who's done that to me. There are other people that I've spoken, like something just keeps bothering me and I'm ruminating, right? And I'm talking to them about it over and over again. And they're like, oh my God, could you please, I want to talk about something else. I don't want to hear about this anymore. After a while, you stop talking to people about stuff because you just kind of realize nobody wants to hear about your stuff. They want you to just be okay because they don't want to deal with your things, right? Mm-hmm. And so I feel like there are very many facets to this. There is the feeling like you're not heard. And so you either complain or repeat or whatever it is. There's feeling like you're not heard. There's feeling like people don't want to deal with your problems because they have their own. And there's also feeling like you are invisible, like nobody sees you. Or you feel like you're not worth people's time because they give more time to others than they would give to you, or because you don't feel like you have something to offer them that will make them want to stay, or there's so many layers to why people feel.
So you develop a belief.
Yes,
and
that's
then
based on rejection.
Causes you to engage in a behavior pattern because that's your consistent narrative. Is like,
yes.
I love what you said. Not that I love what you said, but it was so insightful. Where you're like, who am I repeating myself for? It's not necessarily the person you're having a conversation with. Lately, I've been more introspective than I've been in the past, and more introspective than I've felt comfortable with, to be fair. But me and you share some similar behavior patterns, like where you said to that agent, hey, we should grab a drink sometimes. And it's like, and you're like, oh my God, was that like the wrong thing to say? Especially like, because, I know the story, you're sitting on his lap at the time. So it could have been like totally misconstrued, but
that's not true.
But we have that same thing. Was like, oh, did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Because when I was growing up, and you as well, from the many conversations we've had, being in a situation where you just misspoke or you just said something that was innocuous, but it wasn't perceived as such, the consequences were brutal. Like, I remember this one time. I haven't remembered this in many, many years. It's amazing how things just come up in conversation. I was sitting down. I was a young kid. I must have been anywhere between, who knows, like 7 or 8. And there was a show on, I think it was like something like Jeopardy. And I called out the answer, thinking I was clever. And it turned out it was, well, the wrong answer. And my adopted parents were in the room. My stepdad was in the room. I got beaten severely for that and sent to the room because, like, you're a liar. If you don't know the answer, don't speak up. It's like, and that was turned into, you are a liar. Rather than, okay, yeah, wow, okay, try to engage. See what you know. Be creative. Be bold. I just wanted to see if I knew the answer. Now, of course, I had no basis for the answer, but I thought that was an extreme response. Like, I got hurt severely. So I always developed a pattern of, did I do the right thing? Did I say the right thing? And sometimes there's no way to say and do the right thing in every situation. You just have to have the intention that guides your actions. Like, if you're approaching everybody with respect and dignity, you are much less likely to be insensitive. But I noticed that with you, and sometimes we react to situations because we're trying to make predictions about what's going to happen in the future as a consequence of saying the wrong thing because of multiple experiences, some of which we don't even remember that happened in our past.
I 100% agree with you, and I think a lot of women. I don't know if I want to speak for every woman or every Black woman particularly, but like, you walk around measuring 1,000 consequences ahead. Okay, this one action, how many different consequences could, occur as a result of me taking that action before you even take the action. And sometimes it can be paralyzing when people accuse women of not being able to make a decision. It's like, it's not that. You're like literally running an algorithm in your brain, calculating the odds before you make one decision. Like, what could possibly happen? And as you're doing that, I don't know, you're feeding the baby, you're washing the dishes, you're doing the clothes. You're doing 1,000 different things physically while your mind is doing a million different things intellectually, behind the scenes. And so I feel like, yes, your past influences every decision you make, whether or not you want to believe it's true, right? And if you're someone like you and I who the consequences of whatever actions it was that we took in our past were dire in certain instances, you are going to train yourself to weigh every single thought and decision based on how severe you think the consequence is going to be. And sometimes you probably shouldn't even be spending that time thinking about it, you know?
You know, it's interesting because people do say, well, my past, is not my future. And it's not. Your past does not define you, but it's a stretch to say that your past does not strongly influence you, because that's how we identify patterns and that's how we learn and grow. We make a prediction based on past experiences. And sometimes those predictions are accurate. Sometimes those predictions are inaccurate and we're surprised by the result. And that's kind of called learning if you take a look at it that way. And bringing that back to emotional contagion and emotional fatigue, like I just did a seminar on burnout. And the research that I dug up said that in the United States, I'm sure it's very similar throughout the world, 10 to 15% of everyone in the workforce today is suffering from burnout. And the cost of that is billions. But here's the thing. Upwards of 50% of the people in the world, this is coming out of research from Stanford, I believe, is where it's conducted, up to 50% of the people in the working world are on their way to experiencing burnout. That's extraordinary. And when you're talking about having to constantly worry about saying the right things because of how people respond to you or maybe stereotype you, and a lot of people have been in this situation before. It's almost like this podcast right now. So we're running this program, recording this podcast, but if I have multiple windows open and multiple programs running in the background, this program's not really running efficiently. So if you're always running that program in the background, am I saying the right thing? Am I going to be punished? Did this come off right or not? Or and you got all of these patterns of behavior, defensive patterns. It doesn't really take much to go wrong in your life to where it pushes you into a state of exhaustion.
Yeah.
And the question becomes, as we start to move through this, what do you do about it, really?
That is the $1 billion question. What do you do about it? There's so much that needs to be done about so much. And usually it's the first step. What is the first step to take? And being honest with yourself. What is the first step that I can take? For me, there are days when I just want to crawl under the covers and stay there. And I don't feel it coming out, and sometimes that's okay. It's sometimes okay to lie in bed, sit under the covers, and not do anything for a few hours if that's what your body is asking you to do. But at other times, it's not. And so you have to be able to say, like, okay, what do I need right now? Have I been running for hours and hours and hours and hours and I just need rest? Okay, so can I shut off my phone? Can I, not talk to anyone for a couple hours, make some tea, and just put on your music? What is it? What would it take for me to just calm my nerves right now, right? Other times it might be the other, I don't say the extremes. I don't think that's the proper phrase for it, but it might be speaking to a therapist. Maybe you need to talk to someone who is trained in giving you tools to deal with what's going on in your life at the time. But when it comes to the day-to-day things that you can do for yourself, I think stuff like exercise. And when I say exercise, I mean, you're talking to me, right? I do not like exercise. No, I don't like the look of a gym. But things like long walks, I love. I love yoga. Like exercise classes, maybe group yoga or Pilates and things like that. I also love if I can do it by myself. If I can go to a class, I can do those by myself kind of thing. YouTube has tons and tons of teachers who have their stuff up there that you can just, put on a 20-minute yoga routine and practice yoga in your living room, or go to a class if you're someone who likes the company of others, the energy of having people in the same room doing the workouts with you. Or if you're a gym person like you are, babe, go to the gym, go lift some weights, go run on a treadmill, whatever it is people do in the gym. If you're someone who hikes, Go for a hike, go bike, go swim, go do some form of movement. That always helps. And
so powerful. Oh, my days.
yeah, and I think I'm learning that from you, because I'm not someone who would initially just be like, I gotta go move. I don't. I'm the opposite. I'm the kind of person who just wants to go cuddle under the covers and turn TV on and not talk to anybody.
Even mobility type of movements are super, super important, because I think the most popular example of this is Amy Cuddy's TED Talk, where she talked about the power poses and how that lowered levels of cortisol and elevated testosterone and caused people to appear more and feel more assertive, more confident, less stressed. Not dramatically, but a little bit. A little bit of stress gives you an edge. A lot of stress does probably the opposite. So even mobility type movement, postural type movements, and just incorporating movement intermittently into your day. Of course, exercise. I mean, we've talked about it on this show many times. Just not to like 20 minutes of vigorous movement can elevate what's called atrial natriuretic peptides, which can help modulate the HPA axis in your brain, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, to lower your levels of stress hormones. Because if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling fatigued, you're feeling stressed out, you're interpreting a biochemical state. So it's the biochemistry that causes you to feel that way. Altering your biochemistry, your physiology, could cause you to feel quite differently and therefore perceive the world quite differently. So movement's one of those things. One thing I just want to mention is somebody like, oh my God, what if I cannot get to the gym? So here's something that was fascinating. So when I put that post out about the default mode network and how if you really want to be effective in your work, incorporate time for rest and play, somebody came out and said, yeah, but it's really hard to take time out, right? When you have goals you want to achieve. And I thought, that's interesting. Not just the response, but the person who was responding was an absolute weapon. So, not mentioning names, but she's a presenter in the fitness industry, right? And my video was about taking time out to meditate. My video was about taking time out to just chill and free associate, free write for 20 minutes in the morning. Take time out, even 30 minutes to exercise. And she's going, well, God, that's hard to do when you really have goals you want to achieve. So here's someone who's saying that, like, how do I take time out for exercise? You own 5 gyms. And she's incredible. Like, she works super hard. So even somebody like this, who's motivated, like her job is going to the gym that she happens to own, is like, yeah, this stuff is hard. Do what you can do. Yeah. Because when you get to that point, you'll be able to see opportunities to do more. I mean, we've all had that experience of not wanting to go to the gym, and we just get to the front door and we just do something. And within 15 minutes, it's like, oh, wow, I'm so glad I did this. Let me take this up a notch, or not, but just finish a workout.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had a friend of mine who was talking about, I forgot what we were discussing, the piano or violin. I think it must have been my violin, and it was sitting on my bed, and I was like, oh my goodness, I don't even know how I'm going to get anywhere, with this instrument. And she was like, well, her teacher told her the hardest thing to do when it comes to practice is to open the case. So, right, open the case. Once you've opened the case, you can get started. So I opened my violin case and stared at the violin. But anyway, I really feel like that question of how is very important for people who also struggle with anxiety and depression in a way where they can't physically move. Again, going back to someone like me who just wants to get tucked in bed and I don't want to do anything. I don't want to move. How do you motivate yourself to open the case? How do you put the foot on the ground and get out of the bed and go turn on the YouTube for the 20-minute yoga workout? Again, what I said before, it's step 1. What is the step 1?
You know what's interesting? Mel Robbins is popping into my head right now because she said that her whole talk What people brought up more than anything after that was the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and launch yourself. But we think that when you launch yourself, like think about a rocket and how much force it needs to overcome the inertial force of gravity. And when we say movement, you realize breath is movement, right? So like the muscular contractions of your diaphragm is movement. Just start. It doesn't have to be vigorous. Just make a decision to just start.
Okay. So going with that to just start and talking about breathing as movement. I'm a certified yoga instructor. I'm not a teacher yet, but because I haven't really taken steps to like go teach other people. But one of the biggest things for us,
as we're talking about, just start.
I should just start teaching people. Okay, one of the main things he's laughing at me. Yes, breath is movement. So one of the easiest things you can do while lying in bed and not wanting to get up is if you happen to be on your side, just roll over on your back. If your legs happen to be crossed, uncross them. If your hands happen to be tucked under your head, lay them straight by your side. So now you're in what we'll call corpse pose, right? And then from there, you can start breathing. And I would say practice something as simple as 4 breaths in, deep breath, and at the top of the breath, hold it for 4 counts, and then release the breath out of your mouth for 4 counts, and at the bottom of the breath, hold for 4 counts. Like do that 4 times, and then do another 4 sets of those breath movements with your mouth closed. So in through your nose, hold for 4, out through your mouth, hold for 4, and then do that 4 times, and then next set of 4, in through your nose, hold for 4, close your mouth, breathe out through your nose, hold for 4. And after that, return to your normal breathing patterns and let that help you sit up in bed. Because you can do meditation in bed. Now, that's another thing I want to talk about. Are you up for talking about meditation?
In bed. That's all I heard. So very recently, I interviewed Feldenkrais teacher and practitioner Alan Questel. I really liked this guy. I really, really did. It was one of those things where I was like, oh, this is golden. And one of the things that he talked about was starting with one simple thing. It's a thing that is so simple you couldn't possibly rationalize not starting it, and just train yourself to develop mastery in this one thing. Because if you can get good at something very small and simple and focus on it single-mindedly with excellence, it elevates your sense of efficacy. It starts to move you into a space where you see yourself as someone who is capable of mastery. And that is part of the problem. Most of the advice is go big, do this, you're not doing enough. No, if you want to change something big, do something small. Start with something small. And I absolutely love that. Breath is a great place to start.
Yep, breath is definitely a great place to start, and I feel like meditation would be the next thing that I would recommend when it comes to calming your nerves, calming your nervous system, and dealing with burnout and emotional fatigue or all kinds of fatigues. All kinds of fatigue. So I was reading this book, The Selected Works of Audre Lorde, and Audre Lorde, she was a Black feminist lesbian poet, fierce woman. I mean, her works are incredible. And in this particular book, it's edited with an introduction by Roxane Gay. And I was just reading through it, and I'm on this page where, at this point in her life, she had like journal entries in this book. And this page in her life was around 1985, and she was dealing with liver cancer, and she happened to be in Switzerland at this clinic where she was getting help. And she found a book there that talked about active meditation as a form of self-control. And she was talking about self-control in terms of calming yourself, calming your nerves, being able to like not panic or not get aggravated or not get angry, but just calming yourself. And she said they listed 6 steps. So I want to share those 6 steps because I thought, oh my goodness, this is very helpful. One is control of thought. And it says, think of a small object, for example, a paperclip, for 5 minutes exclusively. Practice that for a month. Isn't that something? Just think about a paperclip for 5 minutes, just a paperclip, as a way to just control what you place your energy on, your mind energy on, right? The second thing they said that was control of action. Perform a small act every day at the same time. Practice this and be patient with yourself. We forget the be patient part. Whenever we try something and we fail, we beat ourselves up like brutally. Something you would never say to another person, you say to yourself. I'm like, that's a horrible thing to do. Be patient with yourself. So practice a small act every day at the same time and be patient. Control of feeling, equanimity. Become aware of feelings and introduce equanimity into experiencing them. So basically you're saying be afraid, but not panic stricken. Like learn the difference between these and be aware of them. Positivity. In parentheses, she says tolerance. So refrain from critical, downgrading thoughts that sap energy from good work. And when she's talking about good work, is the work that you're doing. When you're downgrading yourself, your thoughts, you're sapping the energy out of the good work you're already doing. So refrain from that. Stop beating yourself up. Stop punishing yourself for this. Openness, receptivity. Perceive even what is unpleasant in an unfettered, non-prejudiced way. You're separating yourself from what's happening around you and just going, okay, I'm observing. I'm not being affected by this. I'm just observing it. Last but not least is harmony. In parentheses, she says perseverance. Work towards balancing the other 5. So I read this section and I just sat there thinking about it. I was like, oh my goodness, this is a daily practice for lifting yourself up, right?
We do get impatient when we practice things because it's that connotation around failure. And you heard this growing up. Practice, makes perfect. And it's like, no, perfect practice makes perfect. What's the point of perfect practice?
What is that?
what is the point of really practicing something or doing something if you're not failing? Because that randomness of outcome regulates dopamine production, which influences acetylcholine production, which helps to facilitate the process of learning and error detection from failure. I meant to do this, but this occurred. And an error correction facilitates myelinization, which affects efficiency as well as effectiveness of how neurons communicate, how your brain changes, neuroplasticity. It's like the whole essence of progress is in itself failure. So when you're trying something, even a small thing, there's patience, but there's also curiosity. I just want to see what happens. You either achieve a result or you learn from the observation of a distinction. We hope this was helpful and insightful for you. And, Tiffany Cook brought this up. I am horrible at wrapping up podcasts.
I was like, oh, we're done?
I guess it's like, we're at about that time. And it's just like, I think maybe I have problems with goodbyes. I don't know. Maybe it's sad for me. Maybe it's something that I need to work on. Maybe that's my one thing. Anyway.
Okay. So since we're wrapping this up, because I didn't know we were, it was really lovely, chatting with you today on the subject. I definitely agree that I think as a global community, I would say we are all feeling very fatigued. There is that energy in the air, and you're not alone. If you listen to this, I guarantee you there are tons of people feeling the way you're feeling. Talk to someone if you can't find someone to talk to. Journaling is really, really, really is a really, really helpful tool in that sense. Therapy, I think, is great. Exercise, movement, taking time to just breathe and shut the world out for a little bit helps. And yeah, please write in and share some of your tips, because I want to learn from others what they do to emotionally regulate, during a time like this. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening, and see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Visit us at theselfhelpantidote.com to share your feedback, insights, and recommendations on what topics you'd like us to explore in the future.